This podcast is brought to you by the American Enterprise Institute.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, review, and share.
Thanks for listening. Here's our show.
What in the hell's going on?
What the hell is going on?
What the hell is going on?
I don't know what the hell he's talking about.
You don't have to know what the hell is on it.
What the hell's the matter with these guys?
We don't know what's going on.
What the hell's going on?
Who in God's name knows what it's all about?
Hi, I'm Danielle Pletka.
And I'm Marc Thiessen.
Welcome to our podcast, What the Hell is Going On? Marc, what the hell is going on?
What the hell is going on is we're doing something a little different today. So you know our normal podcast where we bring in a great guest to explain to everyone what the hell is going on with whatever issue we're talking about that week. And we're going to keep doing that every week. But we're deciding to bring you a little what the hell extra. And the idea, it was Dany's idea, actually. She noticed that I actually have a Washington Post column that I republish once a week. She has a Substack that she writes. And we occasionally write something interesting.
Well, mostly, actually.
And so what we thought was, why don't we do a short extra edition of the podcast occasionally in which we read one of our pieces and then we talk about it. And so that's what we're going to do today.
And Marc, you had a fantastic piece, actually, this week in the Washington Post called Biden's latest attack on Trump is wildly inaccurate. And you were really writing about the president's speech at Normandy, which was such a beautiful commemoration, except for the speech, which was not amazing. So why don't you share that piece with us?
All right, well, let me read the piece. Unlike Ronald Reagan's famous Pointe-du-Hoc speech, it's unlikely that anyone will be quoting President Biden's remarks on that lonely, windswept point on the northern shore of France 4 decades from now. But Biden had a much shorter-term political goal, to launch a thinly veiled attack on Donald Trump and suggest that Trump would abandon Reagan's message that, quote, isolationism never was and never will be an acceptable response to tyrannical governments with an expansionist intent, unquote. Put aside how disingenuous it is for Biden, who opposed most of Reagan's successful Cold War policies, to now embrace the Gipper to attack Trump. Is Biden's critique correct? Is Trump an isolationist? It is undeniable that there's an increasingly vocal isolationist faction on the right, and that this faction, epitomized by Senator J.D. Vance and Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, believe that Trump is their ideological ally. But a close look at Donald Trump's record suggests he is not the isolationist they hope him to be. Consider, when Iran crossed his red line against killing Americans, Trump didn't launch feckless strikes against Iranian proxies the way Biden did. He ordered the U.S. military to target Iran's terrorist mastermind, Qasem Soleimani. And then he warned Tehran that if it retaliated, he had selected, quote, 52 Iranian sites representing the 52 hostages taken by Iran many years ago and, quote, and all caps, those targets in Iran itself will be hit very, very fast and very hard, end quote. Iran backed down. That's hardly isolationist. Or take the Islamic State. When the Obama-Biden administration presided over the disastrous U.S. withdrawal from Iraq in 2011, which gave rise to the ISIS caliphate, Trump drove the Islamic State from its caliphate and then ordered the killing of its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Trump twice launched military strikes against the regime of Bashar al-Assad for using chemical weapons against civilians. Trump also launched a cyber attack on Russia, an act of war, targeting St. Petersburg's Internet Research Agency, the troll farm that spearheaded Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. He also gave the green light for the U.S. military to take out hundreds of Wagner Group mercenaries in eastern Syria. After the Obama-Biden administration refused to give Ukraine weapons following Russia's 2014 invasion of Crimea, Trump became the first president to provide Ukraine with lethal aid. He transferred Javelin anti-tank missiles that helped Ukraine defend itself when Russia invaded again on Biden's watch. And while isolationists like Vance and Greene insist the United States should provide not one penny to Ukraine, Trump said he might dramatically increase U.S. aid to Ukraine. Quote, I would tell Putin, if you don't make a deal, we're going to give Ukraine a lot. We're going to give them more than they ever got if we have to, he told Maria Bartiromo of Fox News. Trump also presided over what he called, quote, a colossal rebuilding of the U.S. armed forces, unquote, delivering large increases in defense spending and creating the Space Force, the first new military branch since 1947. Biden, by contrast, has put the United States on track to spend the lowest percentage of GDP on defense since Bill Clinton tried to claim a misguided post-Cold War peace dividend. Trump negotiated the release of more Americans from foreign captivity in 4 years than Barack Obama did in 8, and he did it without paying ransoms or sending plane loads of cash to terrorist regimes. He brokered 3 Arab-Israeli peace accords, the first in more than a quarter century, and a diplomatic achievement worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize. He also negotiated a historic free trade agreement with Mexico and Canada, the USMCA, that even Nancy Pelosi admitted was much better than NAFTA, as well as new trade pacts with Japan and South Korea. Biden, by contrast, is on track to be the first president since Jimmy Carter to neither negotiate nor sign a trade deal during his term in office. Or take NATO. Biden claims Trump wants to eviscerate NATO. Well, not according to Trump. He said in March he will 100% remain in NATO so long as allies carry their weight when it comes to military spending. And as president, Trump got allies to spend hundreds of billions of dollars more on our common defense. When Trump left office, allies were spending $130 billion more on defense than they did in 2016, a figure that was on track to rise to $400 billion by the end of 2024. And twice as many were meeting their commitments to spend 2% of gross domestic product on defense. Bruised feelings aside, Trump left NATO stronger than it had been since the end of the Cold War. Now, critics will respond, what about all the international agreements he withdrew from, such as the Paris Climate Agreement, the Iran nuclear deal, and the INF Treaty? Withdrawing from international agreements that are not in U.S. interests is not isolationist, it's conservative. George W. Bush withdrew from the ABM Treaty, which barred the U.S. from deploying ballistic missile defense, and removed the United States' signature from the Rhodes Statute creating an international criminal court. Trump's record certainly isn't perfect, from his aborted plan to invite the Taliban to Camp David to giving Turkey the green light to invade Syria and attack our Kurdish allies. But looked at objectively, his overall foreign policy record was one of the best of any modern president. Often overlooked is the reason for that success, that Trump surrounded himself with a team of rivals in his first term that included many Reaganite conservatives. It's unclear whether he would continue this approach in a second term, or whether a Trump White House would be staffed by those who would advise him against all the bold actions on the world stage that made his first term so successful. I hope he'll stick with the strategy that delivered so much success to the United States in his first term. This much is clear. A second Biden term would be a disaster. Biden likes to say that on his watch, America is back. You know what else is back? War. Trump is the only president in the 21st century on whose watch Russia has not invaded its neighbors, and was the first president since Ronald Reagan on whose watch America had not been dragged into a new war either directly or by proxy. He achieved this not by retreating behind a fortress America, but by projecting strength on the world stage. If that's isolationism, save us from Biden's policies of engagement. There's the essay. What do you think, Dany?
I loved it. I really think this is an important message because I think that Donald Trump listens. I know he listens to you. I know he reads your pieces, but I also think he listens to the crowds. And, you know, my big complaint, and I know our listeners have heard this probably 10,000 times, is the triumph of the loud over the substantive.
Yeah.
And that's what isolationists are. They're loud, but they don't represent what Americans think. And we're going to hear that later in the week when we hear about the Reagan Foundation's new polling from Roger Zackheim. But that's not what Americans are. As you always say, Americans for sure are reluctant internationalists. You know, they don't want to go racing off to Haiti because, we've never, ever succeeded in Haiti. Ditto for conflicts where we have no interests. For example, Darfur and Sudan, where we had humanitarian interests but didn't have strategic interests. But these isolationists, most of them are the kind of people who, if confronted with, World War II, would say, nah,
Sedate land,
whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so what I like about this is that you make a coherent argument about how Trump, in a second term, were he so lucky as to have one, would be able to pursue a serious policy of continuity on internationalism and on American leadership.
So the interesting thing is the J.D. Vances of the world would have advised him against every single one of the things that made his foreign policy so successful. J.D. Vance would not have wanted him to whack Qasem Soleimani because he'd be afraid of escalation with Iran. He certainly wouldn't have wanted him to pick out 52 sites in Iran in honor of the 52 hostages and destroy them. He wouldn't have bombed Syria over its use of chemical weapons, despite that Trump did that twice. And by the way, he had to be pulled back by his military from doing an even more significant strike on Syria. He wanted to do something bigger, and they actually limited there's stories about how they limited the options they presented him because they were afraid that he would escalate too much. He wouldn't have wanted to go in and take the gloves off our military to destroy the ISIS caliphate. So it's really important that Trump surround himself with that's my big worry about a second Trump term, is that there's going to be an effort to keep the people who advised him to do all the things that made his first term so successful out, and the isolationists to have a monopoly on his attention. And I don't think that's where Trump wants to be or where his instincts are. But God help us if he puts J.D. Vance as his vice presidential nominee.
No, J.D. Vance or in any other position, frankly, in government.
Secretary of Commerce wouldn't be bad.
There you go. He could be Secretary of the VA.
There you go.
That's an agency that requires some serious help. So maybe that should be his success inside a Trump administration. One of the things that really cheered me up in this regard, by the way, I don't know whether you saw it, Marc, but Robert O'Brien, who was Donald Trump's last national security advisor, has a piece in Foreign Affairs. And the headline of it alone is something that, brings a tear to my eye. The return of peace through strength, making the case for Trump's foreign policy. And he makes arguments very similar to yours. And one of the things that he talks about is a word that simply has dropped out of our lexicon, which I think actually was very meaningful to Donald Trump. And that was deterrence. Yeah. Do not mess with us. And in that regard, goes through the litany of all of the things that have happened during the Biden administration because of the projection of weakness, including one that I and you have not cited often enough, but after the debacle in Afghanistan, when the Biden administration went to the U.S.-supported leadership, Ashraf Ghani in Kabul, Biden said, hey, we'll help you get out. And up they didn't skedaddle out, maybe with some cash in hand. They made the same offer to Zelensky.
Yep.
And Robert O'Brien notes in this Foreign Affairs piece that they made that offer. Thank God Zelensky said no. But that's the kind of weakness that they project to other leaders around the world. And if he's the one whispering these things in Donald Trump's ears, and certainly there's gossip that he would like to be the Secretary of State, all I can say is, God bless you, Robert.
Yeah, I think the Zelensky reportedly said, I need weapons, not a ride.
Exactly.
And God bless him as well. I don't think I'm giving anything away because he didn't say it was off the record to say that Trump liked this piece. And that he told me that he and I agree on more on foreign policy than most people might think. So I think Trump agrees with my analysis of Donald Trump's presidency. And I think the other thing is, and you mentioned the pod we have with Roger Zakheim coming up this week. We're interviewing him on the new Reagan Institute poll. Trump knows his voters better than these neo-isolationists do. And it turns out, and I'll preview this, and I have a column coming out in the Post this week on this, where I go through the crosstabs of the Reagan Institute poll, because the Reagan Institute, breaks down Republicans, Democrats, overall views on these things. But if you go into the crosstabs, they break down Republicans between MAGA and non-MAGA Republicans. And here's the shock, and this is a preview of our conversation with Roger, the shock news. Self-described MAGA Republicans are more internationalist and less isolationist and more hawkish than establishment Republicans, non-MAGA Republicans.
And the numbers are not, they're not margin of error.
Yeah, so no, they're not margin of error. Some of them, sometimes they're really wide, sometimes they're less wide. They care more about human rights and democracy and standing up for human rights and democracy than establishment Republicans. Maybe that's because the establishment are Kissingerian realists, whereas these guys are more Reaganite and populist Reaganites. But on issue after issue, I won't spoil the next podcast by giving you the numbers, but you can read my Post column and you can listen to the pod with Roger. On every single issue, they are more hawkish. And what that means is the J.D. Vances of the world don't speak for MAGA. They don't speak for MAGA Republicans. And the people like Marco Rubio, who voted against Ukraine aid in order to pander to the MAGA movement and to pander to Trump, that's not what Trump says. That's not what the MAGA movement wants. In my column, I describe them as they're like a cat bringing their owner a dead mouse he doesn't want. It's like this is so we don't have to be afraid to speak up for American leadership, because the critique, Trump's critique, if you go back to 2016, of conservative internationalism was not so much of conservative internationalism as of conservative internationalists. He said his main critique. Remember, he said we don't win anymore. We don't win. We don't win in the military. We don't win in trade. We don't win in wars. And by the way, I'm going to kick ISIS's ass. That was the critique. It was, we're going to win so much, you're going to be sick of winning.
Yeah.
And, on the litany I just gave you, we won a lot.
Look, I think that, as in all things, that wasn't one of my favorite Donald Trump quotes, but I'll wrap up by saying we now have an opportunity to compare 4 years of Trump with 3.5 years of Joe Biden. And all I can say is, if this is what's called winning, to paraphrase the end of your piece in the Post, I don't want to win like this anymore. I'd rather win the way we did under Donald Trump. And I suspect that there are a lot of people who, when they walk up to make their decision in 2024, they're going to be thinking the same thing. Yeah. Pretty interesting.
It is. And I think also there's a problem that people critique a caricature of Donald Trump rather than what he actually says very often. This just happened with immigration. Like, Donald Trump wants to deport all the illegal migrants that Biden let in the country. New poll shows that 62% of Americans agree with that, including a majority of Hispanic Americans. But he said the other day on a podcast, I want to give a green card to every foreign student who comes here and gets a college degree, including junior colleges. Wow. That is like 1 million people a year. That is, he's a businessman. He understands talent retention. And it's the caricature that if you're against illegal immigration, you must be anti-immigrant. Well, no, not exactly. And there are a lot of Trump supporters who might be anti-legal and illegal immigrant, but he's not. So it's fair to criticize him. I criticized him a lot during his presidency, but criticize what he actually says and what he actually believes as opposed to the caricature, because it's so easy to just toss up a caricature of Trump and then shoot it down, and it's lazy and it's inaccurate.
That was great. Thank you, Marc.
Thank you, Dany. I can't wait to do one of yours next.
I am looking forward to it. Folks, if you have thoughts, opinions, impressions, or things you'd like to hear from us, let us know. You can let us know when in the ratings on your Apple Podcasts or anywhere else, but you can also email us. Don't hesitate. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, tell us if you like this and if you want us to keep doing it and if you want us to stop. It's like, I already read your column, Marc. I don't need to listen to it as well. I already read Dany's column and I don't want to read your columns, Marc. I prefer Dany. You can tell us that as well. But let us know what you think of this new thing, and if you like it, we'll keep doing it. Take care. Let us know what topics you'd like us to cover. You can get in touch with the show by emailing us at whatthehell@aei.org.
Or you can reach us on Twitter. I'm at @dpletka.
And I'm at Marc Thiessen. That's Marc with a C.
Please rate and review the podcast. If you like the show, please subscribe, share it, comment on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this.
Thanks for listening.